Next, we have House File 3926 with Representative Brand. So now we go into two more bills that are going to be talking about farm safety. And so Representative Brand, there are no amendments to this bill, but if you'd like to move your bill.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. I move that House File 3926 be included into future consultation.
Okay, so to be laid over for future consideration, all right. So do you have, again, I'm not sure that anyone's here to testify, but if you would go ahead and present the bill, please.
I don't have any testifiers today, but I do know that, you might remember a couple of weeks ago, we had some very touching testimony in the House committee here about Michelle Grand, the loss of Landon Grand, but not just Landon. There are other folks across the state and across the country that have unfortunately been killed in grain bin accidents just in the past year, but long over time. And what this bill would do is to provide up to $25,000 for the Commissioner of Agriculture to grant either the University of Minnesota or Min-State system to create an application. And that application, like a cell phone app or possibly an electronic device, would do a couple of things. It would design to shut down remotely a grain bin power auger, and then also potentially to call 911. And, just think about how long it actually would take you to use your phone to dial 911. It does take a couple of movements on your phone, or it could just be a quick button to press, and that could mean a difference between somebody passing away and somebody being alive. And so the bill is moving in the Senate. I know we don't talk about the other body, but I have had conversations with constituents in my district and the neighboring district to mine with the senator, and it just came to the conclusion that we could do something. This is kind of a novel approach to do something. There are grain bin apps, but they talk specifically about the amount of bushels that are in the grain bin using telemetrics and that sort of thing. But there's nothing out there in my research for safety. And perhaps this could be an example of something that could be done to help save somebody else's life.
Thank you. I think if there are nobody to testify right now, we'll just go to questions. Representative Keel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Brand, I appreciate the research and being able to control it, a grain bin, but I'm wondering, have we heard from any of our grain bin manufacturers, thank you very much, that would be already working on considering doing this upgrade so that we didn't have this. My understanding is when I went home, I asked some questions about what the difference was, and they're usually called drag-out augers, and the drag-out auger that we had that's old, you could easily be in the bin and manage it. My husband said it would be very difficult to get hurt with it. But the new power augers that are now in our grain bins, you would never want to get into.
Sure.
And that would make very good sense to be able to automatically shut it off and of course, encourage our owners to shut it off right away before they even think about getting in the bin. But yeah, I'm just wondering if you've heard from any of the manufacturers at all, if they're considering something.
Representative Brand.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Representative Keel. I have not. I would imagine they probably aren't going to announce ahead of time that they are creating something like this because we live in a very competitive world and that sort of thing. I would just say that, the difference between grain bin companies might make them not compatible with each other. You talk about Apple and you talk about Samsung, for instance, two different devices. And I think the important thing to note is if this is public dollars going to a public institution, it makes the application public as well. And I think the benefit of that is that nobody controls it, and also that people will all have access to it. And hopefully that also means that it is compatible with both Apple and Samsung phones and that sort of thing as well. But I guess my goal is to create something that's a bit maybe more generic. And no, I haven't heard anything specific from any grain bin companies that are making this. I know that they're working on different things, I know that grain bin manufacturers are looking at providing reinforced anchor points for harnesses, for instance, and stuff like that. You look at some of the older grain bins that don't have that sort of thing, and there's some compatibility issues already. You know, I grew up on a farm, and I realized that some grain bins are set off of a circuit breaker, and some of them still have the old fuse boxes. And, you know, the old meets new technology. I don't know many people that are going to probably spend the money to rewire their grain bins from the old fuse boxes to the circuit breakers. But what I do know is that going forward, having that application in place that can meet the needs of the technology for new purchases and that sort of thing, I think this is worthy pursuit and kind of a novel approach to helping save a person's life.
All right, Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Brand, not trying to get too technical here, but I like the idea of your bill, but
Thank you.
if a farmer wanted to do this, would this signal have to go from his phone to a tower and then back to the grain bin again?
Representative Brand.
Well, that's a good question. That's not something that I can specifically answer. I don't have any advanced degrees and that sort of thing with telecommunications. You know, just my very novice idea, it probably would. Just, you know, that sort of thing. I do know that there are applications, for instance, that right now, if I had an application on my phone, I know that this application exists. I could actually turn off the televisions if I knew what brand these TVs were in the room. And I could program that into a code. I could only imagine that something like this could also be employed to turn off a grain bin as well. And so that's my idea, that it would be not repeating off of a repeater, but more direct contact. But just like a television remote signal doesn't usually go around walls, and it doesn't go through walls very easy at home. And so, you know, those are limiting factors, of course, but something I hope that can be, you know, advanced with this consideration.
Representative Anderson.
Thanks again, Madam Chair. Well, I've been in grain bins and never have had to call for an emergency yet, but, you know, you're in a covered steel structure, and if your reception is spotty to start with, I think you'd have difficulty reaching out to a tower to get that signal back again. And a lot of these augers are at the bottom of the bin, covered by thousands of bushels of corn. So would that signal penetrate the layer of grain to get down there? So again, I like your idea, but we have to be careful about building up some false security here to make sure that these systems would work.
Thank you. Representative Hansen.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Representative Brand, I think one of the things to look at in this as well is if the public does prepare a device or does the research, there's a difference between a family farm where you are the owner operator and your children or relatives are working there, and a farm that has multiple employees, and the responsibility, if there's a publicly available thing, that it's not the employee's responsibility to have the device, but it is the employer's responsibility to make sure that the devices are there for people. I think we tend to get lost in nostalgia that everybody is a family farm with the children of the farmer there, when in many cases you have multiple employees and you're in a different situation with an employee-employer.
Next on the list was Representative Miller.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Brand, I see the intention here. I think it's good. I just want to make a comment that I've worked around emerging technologies in agriculture, and actually some of the work I've done has been in, if you will, a private-public partnership, or public or private. And the concern that I have here is as Representative Anderson said, not only are there companies out there doing this, there's probably companies that are doing this because they have a liability. They're going to naturally be doing this. One of the challenges that you have when you have like a public institution like the University of Minnesota come up with some sort of IP, intellectual property, they don't share well with industry. Industry doesn't share well with higher ed. Sure. And so I think the intention's there, but my concern is that let's say this $25,000 grant went to basically a student coming up with a widget or coming up with some sort of thing like that. It kind of wouldn't extend beyond that. It's kind of the way the system is working. So I get what you're trying to do, and I think we all agree that this is something that needs to be addressed in the farm safety. I'm just not sure that this is going to accomplish what it is that you want it to accomplish.
All right, thank you. Well, I don't see any other questions, and I see no other testifiers coming down. So Representative Brand, just closing comments and any reactions to
Yeah,
what you
absolutely.
heard.
You know, just bringing it back to the Grahn family, at Landon's funeral, Michelle had told me that one of her relatives was there and said that he was going to actually start working on it. He was an inventor. He's going to start working on something like this. I'm not sure how easy or difficult something like this would be. And so having that public-private partnership would be important. And I think the intent of this bill is to make it more open source and less, you know, guarded technology that nobody can use. So my hope is that with this bill, we can actually do something that would help save a person's life.
Thank you. So with that, House File 3926 will be laid over.